In light of the recent outrage surrounding the Epstein files, there's something that isn't talked about enough. Something quite similar, yet is dismissed as Islamophobia when brought up. The other, Epstein Island. Chapter 1. An Island That Isn't a Place.
When you hear Epstein Island, you automatically picture the real location. But think on this. Would Epstein Island be so infamous if it was detached from the history it carries? Probably not. If the location existed without the crimes, it would just be another private island. Similarly, if the name Jeffrey Epstein was detached from the notoriety it had gained, it would mean almost nothing. You see where I'm going with this? Once you understand that, you realize something important. Epstein Island doesn't necessarily have to be a place. It can be an ideology, a dream, a fantasy. And the closest thing we have today to the idea of Epstein Island is none other than the religion of peace, Islam.
Chapter 2. The Other Epstein.
Epstein wasn't the first of his kind. He did not invent human trafficking or child abuse. Both crimes are as old as recorded history, and while such atrocities still happen today, one must ponder how widespread they were hundreds of years ago, when women and children used to be exploited on an unimaginably massive scale. Those are the crimes of which the most influential person in history is guilty. Muhammad, the Prophet-like, or rather, worse than Epstein. Muhammad committed crimes ranging from raping a 9-year-old to trafficking victims of wartime. In Islamic sources, there are accounts documenting the crimes he committed. In Sahih al-Bukhari, book 16, we read that Aisha narrated that she was married to Muhammad at age 6 and consummated the marriage at 9. The hadith indicates that Aisha had no idea what was happening and where she was being taken, and thus she became one of Muhammad's very first victims. In another narration, we read that Muhammad used to have dreams about little Aisha prior to the marriage. It doesn't get creepier than that. These accounts read like documents from the Epstein files. Muhammad was very clearly the Epstein of his time. Alas, these words fall on deaf ears. Muslims have the status of being a protected class. Holding them accountable for glorifying an abhorrent person is considered Islamophobic, which makes me wonder whether this is about standing up to evil or it's just virtue signaling.
Chapter 3. Is this relevant today?
The answer is yes, it is, because the underlying rulings were never abandoned. Both classical and contemporary Muslim scholars across major legal schools have historically permitted marriage involving little girls, and many continue to defend those rulings as religiously and legally valid.
يقول فضيلة الشيخ وفقكم الله: هل هذا القول صحيح، وهو أن الاستدلال بزواج الصغيرة أو على زواج الصغيرة بزواج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعائشة هو استدلال غير صحيح لأنه خاص بهما؟ هذا الكلام صحيح؟
هذا كلام باطل. الأصل عدم الخصوصية. الأصل في أفعال الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم عدم الخصوصية، إلا إذا، لأنه هو القدوة عليه الصلاة والسلام. كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة، إلا إذا دل دليل على الخصوصية. نعم.
Although not every Muslim country accepts or enforces these views, the fact remains that they exist within mainstream jurisprudence and are still cited. And in some countries, there are no legal consequences that follow child marriage, because the practice is Islamically valid and approved by the Prophet worse than Epstein.
Chapter 4. Beyond the Prophet Worse Than Epstein.
What makes this go beyond any comparison to Epstein isn't just the behavior described in the sources, but how it's perceived afterward. Epstein's actions are almost universally condemned once exposed. Better they are defended as morally correct because they're attributed to a figure considered infallible and the absolute source of morality. This is not hate speech, it's raising awareness. The Quran, which Muslims believe to be an infallible word of God, condones child abuse. The Quran gives men consumed by thoughtless lust the promise of an eternity of sexual deviance. It's a pervert's fantasy involving concubines whose bodies resemble children in early puberty, created to satiate his lust. According to Muslims, Muhammad isn't just a man who lived in a specific historical context. He's presented as the perfect moral example for all people to emulate, which means his actions aren't open to moral revision, and because of that, practices that would be considered abusive or criminal today are shielded from criticism. When something is protected at that level, it becomes untouchable. And that is a kind of protection Epstein never had, a kind of protection that sets Muhammad above Epstein and his likes.